Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this important announcement. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm meeting with you from my home in Guelph on the traditional lands of the Adirondack, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. Guelph is currently situated on the Treaty 3 lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, and I want to reaffirm the Ontario Green Party's commitment to the truth and reconciliation process. The affordability crunch is hitting young people disproportionately hard. Many students and recent graduates are struggling to pay the bills as the cost of living skyrockets. And I want to thank Ontario Greens candidate Shelby Bertrand, candidate for Ottawa Centre, who is currently a post-secondary student, and Elyse Robinson, our Ontario Green candidate for Barrie, Springwater, or Medonte, who is a recent graduate, for joining me today for this announcement. It's important to hear firsthand about the affordability challenges that post-secondary students and recent graduates are facing. To young people, students, and recent graduates across the province, I want you to know that the Ontario Greens are here for you. We have your back. We know the cost of living struggles you are facing and the anxiety and stress so many of you are feeling as life gets more expensive. And we know how negative Doug Ford's disastrous cuts to the Ontario Student Assistance Program back in 2019 affected your lives. We are committed. The Ontario Greens are committed to making post-secondary education affordable in this province. Currently, Ontario has the highest tuition rates of any province in the country and the lowest per capita funding for post-secondary education in the country. We must reverse this for our economy, for the quality of life for young people, for our future. And that's why today I'm announcing that the Ontario Greens will immediately reverse Doug Ford's cuts to the Ontario Student Assistance Program, and we will convert loans to grants for low and middle income post-secondary students to reduce your debt burden. We will also immediately eliminate all interest charges on student debt for all post-secondary students. We have a whole generation of young people wondering if they will ever be able to own a home with the hot housing market, combined with the fact that many are graduating with high levels of student debt. Making life more affordable for students and recent graduates is about improving mental health, boosting the economy, and protecting people's wallets. Financial concerns are a huge source of anxiety and stress for many young people in this province. Supporting students with grants and eliminating interest on student debt is about building a healthier, more caring, and more affordable Ontario for young people. Ontario Greens are the only party committed to addressing the real challenges and concerns that young people are facing, whether it's dread about the climate crisis, the inability to find an affordable place to call home, or the financial burden of tuition and student debt. We have new solutions to old problems that are impacting young people in this province. And so I hope those of you who may be spending the long holiday weekend with family and friends this weekend, I encourage you to talk with them about the solutions that Ontario Greens are putting forward to make life more affordable for young people in this province. And now I'd like you to hear directly from a young Ontarian, Ontario Greens candidate Shelby Bertrand for Ottawa Centre, who is currently a post-secondary student. Thank you for joining us today, Shelby, and I look forward to your remarks.
Thank you for having me today. It's really an honor to be here in this group of people. I think essentially the problem that we're currently facing is that our current system with education and the current attitude that governments take towards it is one that's still from an era where the people going to university were often well off enough to not need to worry much about money or need much assistance. If we're going to pride ourselves as a society on how much more variety there is in the student population and how many more people decide to pursue post-secondary, we need to change the system to reflect that changing demographic of people instead of having outdated standards and expectations. So the group today that isn't impacted by money is vanishingly small. If you add concerns any at all from just their normal lives that they're living, that I hear about often as a TA in my line of work, students come and tell me about family issues they're having. I myself have an incurable disease. I have Crohn's disease. I can relate to my students now, having had to work hard to keep my entrance scholarship when I was young, work a restaurant job on top of that to cover the rest of tuition, and have to manage a chronic disease on top of that. The thing is, I don't even think that I'm in that rare of a demographic. Everybody has something else on their plate, and we need to take money off of people's minds because students are stressed out. Students are pessimistic about their future because of money. And our system right now reflects unrealistic expectations for a demographic that is not the majority.
Thank you, Shelby. And we now are open to taking any questions.
Thank you, Shelby. Thank you, Mike. We'll now open the floor to any questions. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function and I will call on you. Okay, not seeing any questions right now. Actually, I take that back. We have a question from Randy Toms from 93.1 The Border. Randy, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, Mike. Hope you're feeling well from the COVID that you got. I can sympathize with you. I had it for a long time. I want to ask you a little bit about prior to the election, there was a lot of talk about merging of school boards, public health units, even maybe some talk about municipalities. Where do you stand on some of that? Do you feel a need to do some of that to maybe save some money, or would you like to see them kept as they are?
Yeah, thanks for the kind well wishes health-wise, Randy. And I'm just to let you know, feeling fine. And like so many Ontarians across the province, just adjusted, and we're moving forward and continuing to build momentum in our campaign. I think right now we need stability in education, in our public health units, and within our municipalities right now. And so the Ontario Greens right now are not advocating for mergers or amalgamations in any of those sectors, because I think after 2 years of disruption from the pandemic, and in the case of our education system, 3 years because of the year of job action prior to the pandemic, that we need stability and we need investment. And so that's why our platform really prioritizes investing in the people in our healthcare system, our education system in particular, to be able to care for us and to serve us. And I think the pandemic has revealed numerous cracks in the foundations of our systems of care in particular, and we have to fill those cracks in. And more disruption will only make it harder to fill those cracks in.
Randy, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, going to your announcement here, tuitions have always been high, even when I went to college 40 years ago. But it was really aided, though, for me through student assistance programs that seem to now, those programs are no longer loan or grant programs, they're loan programs. The other thing, too, is we have a university, it's a 7 Generations Education Institute right in our backyard. They cater to everybody. one of the things that they benefit from is a lot of Zoom meetings and things like that because of the distance that some of the First Nations people and other people have to participate. So wouldn't it be easier to maybe implement some of those programs into universities that will reduce the tuition costs and the overhead costs that some universities and colleges are facing?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, Randy, you've nailed it. Ontario has the highest per capita tuition rates in the country, and actually the lowest per capita funding for post-secondary education, college and university level. That is exactly why we are committed to reversing Doug Ford's cuts to the OSAP program. The biggest cuts the Ford government has made in its budget is actually directly affected the pocketbooks of post-secondary students in this province. And so when we talk about the affordability challenges people are facing, students are bearing a disproportionate burden of those challenges. And that's why it's vital to reverse the cuts. We've made a commitment. It's a $3.5 billion over 4-year commitment. And as part of that commitment is to convert from loans to grants, because we know that the average student now is graduating with $26,000 of debt. And for some, particularly those from lower income households, it can be substantially higher than that. So imagine then going into the kind of housing market that young people are facing, or just the cost of living crunch that so many young people are facing. And so the Ontario Greens believe it's absolutely vital to reverse these cuts, make post-secondary education affordable for young people, ensure they don't graduate with unsustainable levels of debt. And let's be clear, this is important to our economy. We need a highly trained workforce to be able to compete globally, especially in the fastest growing emerging markets of the new climate economy. And we also know that young people spend money locally in our local economy, supporting local small businesses. And so ensuring that they have additional funds in their pockets to be able to pay the bills is vitally important to improving their lives and improving our local economy.
Thank you, Randy. Anything else? Okay, I think he's good. We also have a question from Allison Jones. Allison, please unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi, Mike. I'm glad you're feeling relatively well. I just wanted to ask about gas prices, since that's the topic of the NDP's press conference today. Just wonder, obviously you philosophically believe that gas prices should not be kind of artificially lowered. But do you think there's any way that we should be addressing the gas prices right now in the midst of the affordability crisis and considering how high they are?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I would say that if you look in jurisdictions that have brought in regulations of gas prices, actually haven't worked in lowering those prices. And we see these fluctuations in oil and gas prices throughout history. I mean, in the 1970s, we saw it with the OPEC oil crunch. We saw it right before the 2008 financial collapse. And now we're experiencing it again, partly post-pandemic, but primarily driven by this senseless invasion of Ukraine by Mr. Putin. The bottom line is if we're going to truly address the systemic challenges that people face when it comes to transportation costs, the best way to do that is to electrify transportation and just get big oil out of our wallets, period. How are the Ontario Greens proposing to do that? One, an immediate cut in half of transit fares so we can make transit affordable for people, while at the same time increasing investment and expanding the reliability and quality of service for transit. Two, making electric vehicles, new and used, as well as electric bikes, affordable for the average person. You know, the average car driver, for example, saves $2,000 a year on fuel costs driving electric versus an internal combustion engine vehicle. And then finally, we need to ensure that we build communities where people are not forced into long, expensive, soul-crushing commutes, where they're not forced to drive until they qualify for a mortgage. And so the Ontario Greens plan is to address the foundation, the systemic causes of the affordability crunch people are facing at the pumps right now, so that we can solve it for today, tomorrow, and well into the future.
As you mentioned, like a lot of the things you suggest are addressing systemic issues and will sort of be more long-term plans, other than perhaps the transit price cut. Other than that, is there anything you think we should or could be doing to address gas price affordability right now for, say, the people who, you know, need to drive to get to work before these sort of transit-oriented communities are up and running?
Yeah, well, I think there are multiple ways in which you can look at helping people address rising cost of living. For example, increasing the minimum wage so people have more funds in their pocket. Addressing rising food prices. We're the only party talking about bringing in a grocery code of conduct and clamping down on the price collusion and price gouging that's happening in our concentrated retail markets. So there are a variety of different ways you can approach the affordability challenges people are facing. But the bottom line is we're facing a climate emergency. We have to act urgently. Tweaking the system will not reduce climate pollution, and it ultimately will not address people's affordability concerns. And that's why the Ontario Greens will continue to push for systemic and permanent solutions to people's rising cost of living related to transportation. We're the party that's putting forward new solutions to this old problem that continues to pop up over and over again. Let's fix it by getting big oil out of our wallets. We know that Ontarians ship about $25 billion out of the provincial economy to buy fossil fuels from other jurisdictions. If we keep that money in Ontario, fueling our transportation system with low cost, made in Ontario clean energy, that will create more jobs, more prosperity, and save people more money.
Allison, any follow-up?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Just message in the chat or use the raise hand. All right, that looks like everything for now.
Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. I especially want to thank Elyse and Shelby for the fantastic campaigns you're running. It is so important to have young people involved in the political process, especially as candidates, because your voice needs to be heard at Queen's Park and in this election campaign. And I just want young people all across this province to know that the Ontario Greens have your back. We know that a disproportionate burden of the cost of living crisis that many people are facing fall on the backs of young people. And we are here to support you, whether it's making housing more affordable or making post-secondary education more affordable. That is why we will reverse Doug Ford's cuts to OSAP. I don't understand what he has against university students and college students. We will reverse his cuts, and we will make post-secondary education more affordable for you and reduce your debt burden. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.